Hello, I'm Evan with New Life for Old Bikes. In our last episode, I introduced you to my 1975 Cotter 3-speed road bike. In this episode, we're going to discuss one of the items that's specific to this vintage of bike. In this case, it's a 3-piece cottered crank. And the cotters are a soft metal and they're tapered. So the more you tighten the nut, the more deformed the cotter gets and the harder it is to get out. We're going to have either one of two things happen. Either it'll fall apart and you'll wonder how in the world it stayed together, or it won't come apart at all. Cotter pins are available in several different sizes. They're also available in English as well as French styles. Once we pull this out, I'll show you how to measure the size of the cotter pin. As far as the French or English style, you just have to know which one you have. Several days before you work on your bike, remove the nut off the end of the cotter pin. Fill the hole liberally with penetrating oil. Don't be stingy about this. These are really hard to get apart. A cotter pin press is available to push out the cotter pins. However, a cotter pin press is about 2 to 3 times what this bike is worth. Since I only do about one of these a year, it doesn't make sense for me to keep a tool like that on hand. The tools I'll be using for this job are a hammer and a punch to push out the cotter pin, a 10mm wrench to loosen the nut on the cotter pin, a 15mm wrench to loosen my rear wheel, a Phillips screwdriver to remove the chain guard, and a spanner wrench to loosen and tighten the bearing cups. Before we remove the chain ring from this side of the bike, we're going to remove the chain guard. If you have a 5 or 10-speed bike, chances are your chain guard is built into the outer chain ring. Step 1 is to remove the nut off the end of the cotter pin. There's a cotter removal tool. Unfortunately, I don't have one of these. It's probably 2 to 3 times what the value of the bike is. We have several options here. The first option is take a hammer and beat it out. That's not such a good option because you'll bend that pin, and those are really hard to find. The second option, which is the one I'm going to go with, is to use a pin punch and a hammer and knock it out. This has been soaking for several days and it came apart really easy. The first thing I'm going to do is loosen the back wheel so I can slide it forward a little bit. There we go. That's loose enough so we can get a pin punch and a hammer on it. Unfortunately, after fighting with this cotter pin for about an hour, I'm unable to remove it. I'm afraid I'm going to damage it, so in this case what I'm going to do is leave the left crank arm attached to the spindle or the center shaft, and I'm simply going to remove the bottom bracket this direction. To remove this outer ring, I'm going to use a spanner wrench. Well, the bearings don't look bad, just a little bit crusty. To measure your cotter pin, go across the diameter. In this case, the measurement is 9.5 millimeters. The other two measurements that are important are from the end of the cotter pin to the end of the bevel where the threads start. The last measurement you'll need is from the end of the cotter pin to the end of the threads. Normally I drop my bearings and spindle into some mineral spirits. In this case, since I can't remove the bearings from the spindle, I'm taking some penetrating oil and cleaning them. While you're cleaning the bearings, remember you also need to clean out inside the frame. There's another bearing cup in there that needs to be thoroughly cleaned. You can remove it from the other side, but it's not necessary. When greasing the bearings, make sure you fill the void with plenty of grease. Since I was unable to take the crank arm off this side of the spindle, what I'm doing is forcing a little bit of grease down into the bearing. Snug up the bearing cup. Make sure that it's not loose. You don't want it to be tight either. You want it not to bind. With the pedal in the upright position, the threads go forward and the bevel goes down. This may be obvious, but make sure that the pedals are going opposite of each other. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, like and subscribe.